choir is sharing two songs with you this morning, both connected to South Africa. There is More Love Somewhere refers to the elusive love that Steve Biko did not get to experience before he was cut down at an early age, and the tune is named after him. The second one is a freedom song from South Africa during the resistance to connect us to the topic today.
So as I was leaving my work as a nurse practitioner with the Prescott Veterans Administration, it took a few months to say goodbye to all those patients who I had gotten to know over the years that I had been working there. And I remember one conversation that I had very clearly. Jamie asked me what I was going to do when I left, and I explained that I felt called towards social justice work, lending my weight toward healing the world. We talked for a while longer, and then as she stood to leave, she turned back to me one last time, and she said, "You know, I used to work in the county court system as a legal aid. You're going to find yourself disappointed. It's all about paperwork and filing. You won't find many people who aren't guilty or who are not trying to scam the system. The judges are too lenient and they let people off. You won't have much luck getting justice done." And it took me a little moment after she left as I just sat there thinking, and I realized the people outside my religious circle may have a different definition of the word justice than I do. Because justice to me, and those of us who are more progressive, means something a little different. Jamie assumed I was intending to work within the judicial system of the country, so that I could get more people convicted. Well, it never occurred to me that I would work within the current systems of justice. In fact, most of my interest and effort goes towards opposing the current justice system, which has been established by people in power to protect their own property and interests and has come to be used to oppress people of less political and financial power. There's a big difference between the current justice system and social justice. There is a big difference between what is legal and what is the right way to treat people. Peter Morales, past president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, wrote these words about probably 15 years ago. "As a religious people who affirm human compassion, advocate for human rights, and seek justice, we must never make the mistake of confusing a legal right with a moral right. The forced removal of Native Americans from their land and onto reservations was legal. The importation and sale of African slaves was legal. South African apartheid was legal. The confiscation of property of Jews at the beginning of the Nazi regime was legal. The Spanish Inquisition was legal. crucifying Jesus was legal. Burning Michael Servetus at the stake for his Unitarian theology was legal. The fact that something is legal does not cut much ethical ice. The powerful have always used the legal system to oppress the powerless. It is true that as citizens we should respect the rule of law. More importantly, though, our duty is to create laws founded on our highest sense of justice, equity, and compassion. Loud voices urge us to choose fear, denial, reactionary nationalism, and racism. We must resist and choose the better way urged by every major religious tradition. We must choose the path of compassion and hope. We must choose a path that is founded on the recognition that we are connected, that we are all in this together. That's the end of his quote. This is true at the small level as well as the larger social level. Whenever we find ourselves making decisions and choices based on policy, regulations, and laws, as people of faith, we must also attend to our better nature and bring compassion, equity, fairness, all these into the decision-making. Effective work for social change, our work of recreating laws and resisting common legal practices, requires us to be theologically literate and engaged. It's all too easy to forget what our religious framework is, to forget that we ground ourselves in theology. And by theology, what I'm talking about today is the structures of meaning that shape our way of living. To go a step further, I think we shy away from identifying ourselves as religious people. For decades now, the religious right, beginning with the moral majority and then the Christian coalition and so on, have attempted to speak for all America's diverse religious people. Their goal has been to intimidate, distance, and silence the more progressive and prophetic voices within American religion. And as a result, the voices of those who are not Christian fundamentalists have been ignored, particularly by the media, who gravitate to the extreme. And those of us who are religious liberals hardly want to admit we come from Christian origins any longer because of the trauma inflicted by religious conservatives. I recently bought a used car, and for the first time I have a Bluetooth connection from my iPhone to the car's radio system. Of course, when I got this, I had no idea how it worked. So every time I get in the car, my audiobooks comes on, and I can't figure out how to stop it. It's just on and on. And I'm telling you this because I had just ordered Tim Alberta's new book called The Kingdom, the Power, and the Glory. And I don't know if any of you have heard of that book. It's been on NPR quite a lot. But in the introduction, he starts by explaining he's an evangelical Christian. And as soon as he mentioned this, explaining his upbringing in the evangelical tradition, I desperately tried to turn off that doggone audiobooks, and I could not figure out how to turn it off. It took me 3 weeks to get that thing off. I had to listen to Tim Alberta every time I got into the car. But you know what? That was a good thing. Because it profoundly changed my understanding of what's happening in the Christian right these days, learning that it is being torn apart by the current politics of this country. My instinct was to turn that off, to not even bother listening, because I did not want to hear from the evangelical right. I didn't want to listen because of my traumatic history with them. But it works to my own detriment when I refuse to hear religious voices other than those like mine. Rebecca Parker says this: many liberal people of faith have moved away from religious language and religious frameworks to advance their social justice hopes, forgetting that those hopes had their origins in the ethical teachings of their own religious traditions. In other words, our moral compass comes from our religious theology, but we are also ungrounded because we can't articulate our own theology. How can we claim to be the moral voice for the country when we don't know our own basic framework? Theology can provide the framework as it defines our religious community. It defines this by the covenants we make, the promises we make. It defines this by the vision of how we treat all people in need of healing, transformation, and sustenance during difficulty. It defines this by reminding us that there is something holy in life, inspiring creativity, compassion, and social action. It defines this by reminding us that we are relational, that we can form partnerships and dialogue with others to promote justice and compassion in the world. This is not the theology of our ancestors. The theology we come from tends toward hierarchy, with God and his chosen servants, otherwise known as popes and bishops and ministers, given the ultimate authority. Our traditional theology is less relational and much more subservient. There's a domination narrative over people and over the earth itself. It's legalistic, with clear commandments and laws, with consequent punishments and damnation. And there's a distinction between what is holy and what is human, often based on distrust and even disgust with people. Theology has metamorphosized quite a bit over the past decades. Moving out of a theology established by the elite, those seen with less power or prestige have asserted theologies that challenge traditional and conservative ones. Liberation theology promotes social and economic reform in favor of the poor and politically oppressed and addresses race and caste inequality. Feminist theology re-examines scriptural teachings from a woman's perspective, countering arguments or practices that place women in inferior positions. Eco-feminist theology explores the revelation of the holy found in the relation that exists between all things. Public theology is one that addresses social, political, and cultural theology in terms accessible to the general public, in ways that move people toward pluralistic public space. Black theology seeks to liberate people of color from political, social, economic, and religious subjugation, exploring God in light of an oppressed community. And queer theology opposes the fixed social and cultural norms regarding gender and sexuality, bringing equitable value to marginalized experiences and perspectives. These are just a few. There are so many more. All these theologies come in response to oppression found in the traditional religious church, and they can contribute to how we understand who we are and what is ours to do in these social, economic, and political times. Earlier, I said our theology is the structure of meaning that shapes how we live. It's the structure of meaning that shapes how we live every day. While we can be committed to making the world better, our theology tells us why that is necessary. It guides our purpose. And our theology tells us how we do this. It sets our values and our priorities so we more easily distinguish between what is legally right and what is morally right. Rebecca Parker, in her book, A House of Hope, describes theology in terms of the architecture of a house. She says, "This is a home built on the understanding that all life is interdependent, whose foundation is faithful care, whose threshold is the open-hearted welcome, whose kitchen serves any in need, and where love can lie down in peace and take joy. This kind of love can provide us the nourishment we need to resist the excesses and injustices of market capitalism. It can instigate more justice and sustainability for the planet." She goes on and ends with, "If we can create a home for such love, it will indeed be a habitation that will offer hope to our world." Come, my friends, let's build this house together. Let us learn and lean into our theology of love. Blessed be.